It was 1967, and Elvis was in a trap. A beautiful trap, sure. A trap with gold-plated bars and silk sheets. But a trap all the same. He was the biggest star in the world. He was also the most bored man in the world. His life was a formula. Fly to Hollywood, make a movie. The plot was always the same. He was a race car driver, or a boat captain, or a pilot. He'd meet a girl, he'd get in a fist fight, he'd sing a few songs. The songs were part of the formula too. They were written for the movie. They were about clams, or yoga, or teddy bears. They were not rock and roll. They were not the blues. They were not the stuff that made him Elvis Presley in the first place. Then he'd go to Nashville. He'd go to RCA's Studio B, a place they called the home of 1,000 hits. It was a factory, a hit factory, and the workers in this factory were the best in the world. They were a group of studio musicians known as the A-Team. You've heard them on 1,000 records, even if you don't know their names. Floyd Kramer on piano, Bob Moore on bass, Buddy Harman on drums, Hank Garland, Grady Martin, Harold Bradley on guitar. These guys were machines, they were pros, they could show up at 2 p.m. for a session not knowing the song. The producer would play them a demo. They'd make a few notes on a piece of paper, and by 2:15 they were cutting a hit record. They were precise, they were clean. They were perfect, and that was the problem. Elvis was tired of perfect, he was tired of clean. He was tired of the formula. The music he was making felt hollow. It had no soul. It was product. He would stand in the studio surrounded by these incredible musicians, and he would feel nothing. He'd sing the silly songs for the silly movies, he'd do his job. The A-Team would do their job, and everyone would go home. Another session done. Another few songs in the can, another paycheck for everyone, but a little piece of his musical soul would die each time. He was disconnected, he'd show up late, he'd seem uninterested, the musicians saw it. They respected him, of course. He was Elvis. But the fire was gone. He was just going through the motion. And they were too. It was a job. A very well-paid, very prestigious job. But still a job. The creative spark, the danger, the raw energy that had scared a whole generation of parents a decade earlier. A younger guy named Felton Jarvis. Felton was different. He was a fan. He remembered the Elvis from the Sun Records days. The Elvis that shook his hips and sang like he was possessed. Felton believed that guy was still in there somewhere, buried under all the movie scripts and bad songs. He wanted to find him, he wanted to set him free. Felton started looking for different kinds of songs, not movie songs, real songs. Songs with some grit, songs with a story. He was digging through a pile of demos one day. He put on a tape by a country singer and songwriter named Jerry Reed. Reed was a brilliant guitar player. He had a unique style. It was funky and swampy and complicated. It was all his own. And he wrote songs that were just as unique. Felton heard one song in particular. It stopped him cold. The song wasn't a love ballad. It wasn't a novelty tune. It was a story. It was about a guy with nothing but a guitar. He travels from town to town. He plays in smoky bars and rough joints. He gets by on his talent. He follows the music wherever it takes him. He's a survivor. He's an artist. He's free. Felton knew. This was the song. This was the story Elvis needed to tell. It was the opposite of his life. Elvis couldn't just pick up a guitar and walk into a bar. He was a prisoner of his own fame, but the spirit of that traveling musician. He took the demo to Elvis. He was nervous. It wasn't the kind of song Elvis had recorded in years. It was raw, it was country, it was bluesy, it wasn't slick. Elvis listened. He listened again. A light came on in his eyes, a light Felton hadn't seen before. He connected with it. Deeply. This was real. This felt like him. Or the him he used to be. The him he wanted to be again. "I want to play guitar on this one," Elvis said. That was the first sign that this session was going to be different. Elvis rarely played guitar on his records anymore. The team had guitar players who were faster, cleaner, more precise. Why would Elvis play when he had the best in the business on the payroll? But this was different. He didn't just want to sing the song. He wanted to be the guy in the song. And that guy played guitar, so they booked the session. September 10th, 1967, in Studio B in Nashville, the usual time, the usual place, the usual musicians were called. The A-Team, they showed up, ready for another day at the office. They set up their instruments. They tuned up, they waited for Elvis. Elvis arrived, and he was a different man. He wasn't late, he wasn't distant, he was buzzing with energy, he was carrying his own acoustic guitar. He walked right into the studio and started talking to the musicians about the song. He was excited. He played them the Jerry Reed demo. The A-Team listened, they nodded. They were pros. They heard the song. They heard the tricky guitar part. It was in a weird tuning. The rhythm was funky and off-kilter, but they were the A-Team. They could handle it. One of the session guitarists, Harold Bradley, started trying to figure out the part. He was a master, one of the most recorded guitarists in history. He could play anything. They started to run through the song. Elvis was singing, he was playing his acoustic guitar. The A-Team was trying to find their place, but something was wrong. The feel wasn't there. It was too clean, it was too perfect. The A-Team, in their brilliance, were smoothing out all the rough edges. They were turning this raw, swampy tune into a polished Nashville record, and Elvis, no, he kept saying. That's not it. It's gotta be dirtier. It's gotta have that funky feel. They tried again, and again. The frustration in the room was growing. Elvis was trying to explain the feel he wanted. But it was a feel, not a series of notes on a page. The A-Team was trying to give him what he wanted, but they were working from their own playbook. A playbook of professionalism and perfection. They couldn't unlearn their own mastery. The groove just wasn't happening. Elvis looked at Felton Jarvis. He was getting desperate. This song meant something to him. He couldn't let it become another piece of product. He knew what was missing. It was the sound of that demo, the sound of that one specific guitar player. "Where's the guy who wrote this?" Elvis asked. "The guy who played on the demo. Can we get him?" Felton Jarvis got on the phone. "Find me Jerry Reed. I don't care what he's doing. Get him down to the studio. Now." Jerry Reed was out fishing. He was not expecting a call to come play on an Elvis Presley session. Reed was a respected songwriter and a killer guitarist, but he wasn't part of the core A-Team. He was a bit of an outsider, a maverick. When he got the message, he thought it was a joke. When Elvis Presley wanted him, he dropped his fishing pole, rushed home, grabbed his guitar, and sped to the studio. He walked into Studio B, nervous as a cat. Here was his hero, Elvis Presley. And here was the A-Team, the gods of the Nashville studio scene. He felt like a kid who had stumbled into the principal's office. Elvis walked right up to him. "Show me," he said. "Show me how you played that thing." Jerry Reed picked up his beat-up nylon string guitar. He took a deep breath, and he started to play. The room went quiet. What came out of that guitar was magic. It was that sound. That funky, clawhammer, syncopated, dirty groove. It was a sound nobody else in that room could make. It wasn't about being technically perfect. It was about a feel. A gut-level rhythm that came from somewhere deep. Elvis's face lit up. That's it. That's the sound. The whole dynamic of the session shifted. For hours, the A-Team had been in charge, with Elvis as the vocalist. Now Jerry Reed, the fishing trip interrupted outsider, was the center of the universe. Elvis was focused entirely on him. "Let's try it again," Elvis said. "Just me and him, and bass and drums." So they started again. But it was a jam now, not a structured recording. Elvis on vocals and acoustic guitar. Jerry Reed on his nylon string, playing that impossible lick. Bob Moore trying to find a bass line that could lock in with Reed's crazy rhythm. Buddy Harmon trying to find the pocket. It was messy. It was loose. It was exciting. For the first time in years, Elvis was leading a band, not just singing in front of one. He was feeding off Reed's energy, he was pushing the rhythm, he was improvising, he was making music. Real, raw, exciting music. But for some of the other musicians in the room, it was chaos. This was not how things were done. Sessions in Nashville ran on a schedule. You started at a set time. You ended at a set time. The union was very strict about it. A standard session was 3 hours long. You were expected to cut 3 or 4 songs in that time. But clock in, make hits, clock out. This jam session had been going on for hours. They were still on the first song, and the clock on the wall was ticking. It was approaching 10 p.m. The end of the session leader, who was responsible for the union rules and keeping things on track, looked at the clock. He looked at the other 18 members. They were professional. They were paid to be there until 10 p.m. And 10 p.m. was here. This chaotic, endless jam on one song was not what they were being paid for. It was unprofessional. It was breaking the rules. Quietly, without a big fuss, they started to pack up. One musician put his guitar in its case. The piano player closed the lid on the keys. There was no big argument, no shouting match. It was a silent protest, a professional statement. It was their way of saying, "This is not how we work. The session is over." They picked up their instrument cases, they nodded to the producer, and they walked out the door. Imagine the scene. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, is in the middle of a creative breakthrough. He's finally feeling the music again, he's on fire, and his band, the best studio musicians on the planet, just packed up and walked out on him. For a moment, there was silence. The door to the studio swung shut. Elvis, Jerry Reed, and the few who remained just stood there. It could have been the end of the night, it could have been an insult that shut Elvis down completely. But it wasn't. The walkout didn't kill the vibe, it purified it. The ones who left were the ones who were tied to the old way of doing things. The ones who stayed were the ones who were caught up in the new energy. It was now a smaller group, not a gang. It was them against the world. The pressure was off. The rules were broken. Now they could really play. Felton Jarvis looked at Elvis. Let's get this. They started again. Just a skeleton crew. Elvis, Jerry Reed, a bass player, a drummer. The sound was leaner, it was meaner, all the polish was gone, all that was left was the raw groove. They were all focused on one thing, nailing that feel. They ran it down again and again, each take getting hotter, looser, funkier. Elvis was ad-libbing, laughing, shouting encouragement. He wasn't just a singer anymore, he was the band leader. He was in control of his own sound for the first time in a decade. And then they got it. The magic take, the one where everything clicked. The raw energy, the swampy groove, the defiant joy. It was the sound of an artist breaking out of his cage. It was miles away from the soundtrack songs. It was dangerous again. That night changed everything. It was a small rebellion, but it was a crucial one. Elvis had stood up to the Nashville machine. He had rejected the formula, he had insisted on making music his way, and he had won. The walkout wasn't a malicious act. The 18 musicians were just doing their job and following the rules that had governed Nashville for years. They were craftsmen. But Elvis on that night needed to be an artist, and the two things clashed. The clash created a spark, and that spark reignited his career. This session was the beginning of the end for the old Elvis. It was the first step on the road back, the road that would lead to the black leather suit of the '68 comeback special. The road that would lead to the legendary recording sessions in Memphis where he would cut some of the best music of his life, songs like Suspicious Minds and In the Ghetto. It all started in that studio after the pros went home. It started when it was just a small group of guys playing a dirty, funky song about a traveling musician. It was the night Elvis Presley remembered who he was. The song they cut that night, the song that caused the walkout and changed everything, was Guitar Man.